Hey, hello everybody. It is Monday, March 30th. It's my birthday. Whoa.
Happy birthday!
Thank
They say it's your birthday, Janet, we're in quarantine.
you. I've already heard three different birthday songs today, and I'm very grateful for all of them. Um, and we're in full on dealing with COVID mode, and Jen brought up a couple of interesting topics already, um, and we'll see who else joins the call. But we got Jen here, we got Penny here. I'm sure we're gonna have no shortage of stuff to talk about. So Jen, do you mind just why don't you start off with like recap us your status and like what's going on, and then we can segue into the topics we discussed before we started the call.
Okay. And let me preface this by saying I have been asked to make a sandwich by my 6-year-old, so that's what I will be doing right now. So I apologize if I'm
Welcome to
flittering.
the new reality. Yeah.
Just what it is. So we are closed to the public. We are allowing members to still come in because we have some members whose businesses fall under the category of essential services. We have like maybe 3 or 4 people like flittering in and out. Flitting in and out. That's like the second time I've used that word. Okay, my brain's going. Anyway, and we're also still collecting mail twice a week. Yeah, that's our status. I was able to cut a bunch of expenses for April. Currently exploring some employee partial furlough. I don't even know if that's the right term. Which she'd be going from a full-time employee to a part-time. But in the light of the CARES Act, that might not even be necessary. I don't know. It's all just really new information. And also, with the latest ruling of social distancing is going to be in place until April 30th. Now I'm wondering, okay, I probably have to get some communication out to my members about what's going to happen in May. It's like, do I offer to lower rates? Do I not poke the bear? Because right now I've only had 2 members say that they want to downgrade, and I'm pretty happy with that number. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the gym or the subscription service that you never use, and suddenly they contact you and you reply back and say, oh yeah, by the way, I've been meaning to cancel. So
Yeah.
yeah, wrestling with that.
Okay. So two big topics there, and I think it's just going to take us a little bit of time to really get a handle on both of them. But one is this CARES Act, which is designed specifically to help deal with the fact that cash flow is a problem for small businesses, for all businesses right now, and to help keep businesses in business during this time. And so the theory is that there should be capital that businesses will have access to potentially very soon, um, that could either be a loan or could even be free money or could be a forgivable loan. Uh,
Yeah, I'm not sure about like how much of it is free money, how much of it is it a loan? Like, is it?
yeah, yeah. And as I said before we started the recording, I don't know that anybody actually knows yet. There's probably going to be subsequent like court rulings, and they're probably going to even like end up passing other bills that clarify certain details of this. Um, we're only talking about spending $2 trillion here, so it's not like it's a big deal or anything. Um, Jen, I may have lost your signal, or maybe you guys have lost mine. Can either of you hear me?
I can see you. I can hear you.
All right, good. All right, you're back. Everybody's good now. Um, One of the things I read was that the loans are that under certain circumstances the loans are forgivable. So it could be that you can get a loan and then get it forgiven, and then it's free money? Question mark. Yeah. Um, So I'm going to guess that like all this all happened at the end of last week. And I was talking with someone about this, and they were saying, by the time we hit early this week now, um, somebody's going to have figured this out. Like the articles are going to come out in the next day or two, I would say. I'm sure some of them are online already that are going to be explaining in more gross detail. This is exactly what to expect. Um, Even then, I'm sure it's still going to be a lot of question marks, but I'd say let's just do what we can to like all of us kind of keep an eye out for any resources we think are helpful and do what we can to find some clues about how to go about this and then let's try to get what we can. Yeah, because I think you're right, Jen. Like there's some decisions you have to make about how you're going to pay or not pay your employee, and whether the government's going to help you with that and how is going to make a big factor in how you approach your business from now on. Yeah, and like I can try doing some research on it right now, but it might be hard to do well during the call. So, um, yeah,
Don't do
yeah,
that.
maybe better we wait. Probably the easier thing for us to talk about during the call is this topic of how to correspond with members and how to handle that. I can tell you that it's something that I dealt with in various capacities over the years. But when I was closing my space, this was a major topic because I didn't know whether I would be closing my space until maybe 6 weeks before our lease ran out. And, we had to go through this process of like, you know, telling people we didn't know what we were going to do, but we were working on a plan and, basically just trying to like walk that tightrope and, balance it as best as we can. And it is a very tricky topic. And I don't think there's any like, I think the answers aren't necessarily obviously right. It's a matter of just like working with what you got. Um, Penny, well, let's say hi to Penny first and see what's going on in Penny's world, and then we'll go into it. But Penny, hi, how are you? What's the status? Tell us how things are going in your world.
So I will do that in just a second, but I did have a comment on what you were just talking about, and that is just always keeping in mind our own level of avoidance and wanting to avoid difficult topics, because I think we all kind of can come at life that way. And then that book I love so much, oh, now I'm not going to remember the word. I'll think of it in a minute. It was a book about creating good cultures, right? The culture code, right? And they were talking about having those difficult conversations. So it's one of the characteristics of good cultures is when we are able to have those difficult conversations. So I'm not saying, Jen, you should do any particular thing right now, but just kind of noticing your own, kind of not wanting to poke the bear, not wanting to wade in there. That's my thought right now. But so, yeah, I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania. We are a group of therapists. So it's a therapy co-working space. And some people are still coming in because we are considered essential, but a lot of people are working from home. Some people are coming in, especially the people who have small kids at home, because how can you really do, 5 hours back to back of therapy, in a closed room when your kids know you're home. So some people are still coming in. So far, nobody's canceled. We have 23 members. Only 10 of them use the offices, and so far nobody has canceled or downgraded. So I know that could be time limited. I mean, who knows what's going to happen. I did ask my landlord for a reduction of my rent by $300. I mean, we pay about $2,300 a month. And so I went ahead and asked him that, and he said yes. So that's good. And we had just gotten to the point where we were like just covering our basic expenses. And so right now, I think this month, it's probably the same, thank God, that we can just cover our basic expenses. But then I'm just kind of assuming that they won't want to keep paying, especially if they're not using the offices. And so like Jen, like you, I'm wondering how much should I talk about that and how much I shouldn't. Although I did listen to Alex's whole talk, and, he's really talks about being straightforward and letting people know, hey, if you do have a problem, then let me know because we want to work something out, rather than not mentioning anything. That's where I am.
Gotcha. Thanks, Penny. I'm so glad to hear that y'all so far have been weathering this storm pretty well. The members not canceling or asking for too much back. Um, I think it's a testament to what you've built that's the case so far. And we all still probably don't know exactly how the next few weeks are going to go. So I guess we just got to hang tight. But I think what you're bringing up, Penny, is a good way of approaching the conversation about how to deal with members. Um, and I will say, I think that there's a way to account for the concern that Jen has, which is, not poking the bear. It is. I think it's a valid concern that, it, it, it's possible to send an email that will end up losing you a lot of money. Right? So like you want to be careful about how you approach it, basically.
Well, yeah, plus I'm not sure I would want to volunteer. That's kind of my nature, is to just get in there and volunteer to help people out and just volunteer. Okay, if you're having a lot of trouble, just let me know. It's all fine. But I don't want to volunteer that much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's one thing if it's like volunteering to help someone out. It's another thing if it's saying I'm volunteering to sink my business, and y'all are dealing with you don't have massive margins or massive like cash in the bank to weather these kinds of storms. So, that's part of why, hopefully the government situation will help out. And, the other thing is that just thinking in terms of timeline here, there's now and then there's after this. And after this, we can expect that we're going to have a massive influx of interest because everyone's losing their minds working from home right now. So we've got millions and millions of people that are going to be coworkers in the next 6 months or whatever it is. And so it's a matter of getting from here to whenever that time is, a few months from now. And so what we can also think about is the relationship that you have with your members between now and that time, to say that, people who stick with us during this time are people we'll be grateful for later when everything's prosperous. And so, I don't know how that figures into what is explicitly offered from a business standpoint, but it's just a nice thing to keep in mind. So what I'm thinking is, and I feel like this is going to be different for every space owner, and it's a very personal thing. And I'd be curious to know what y'all got from like Alex's video or Kat's conversation, if either of you got any salient takeaways from that are worth sharing. Did anything come to mind from other of those video conversations?
I didn't watch Alex's yet.
Okay.
But I've read all his stuff.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, he's in a lot more stable place. He's been around for 10 years. I guess is my first thought.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still not even. So.
Right. So the thinking that I'm having is that we want to emphasize what we can give people. So like the uncertainty was what will cause people to feel doubt about whether they should keep paying for their membership, but the leadership is what will cause them to want to stick around. And so when they see that you're being strong and decisive and that you're focused on them and their needs and fulfilling those needs, that's what reassures people as far as their like emotional relationship to you as a leader, right? And like there's kind of two ways of looking at the way business works. One is just physical logistics of money, of like some people are going to cancel because they just don't have the money, and there's just nothing I can do about it. That's the way it is. But then the other one is the emotional side, and people are largely not rational people, and so whether they keep paying you or not, a lot of it comes back to how they feel about you. And so, that's where you have a lot of power, even if you don't have a lot of power over circumstance. And so, Jen, I think what you've been doing is is really great. You've been super proactive about getting virtual event programming going. You've been creating all kinds of good stuff. You've been, creating like good materials online and resources and things like that. And I think that that's probably the best thing you can be doing now is showing people the value you're going to create for them um, in this current form, and buying yourself some time. Um,
Uh-oh.
oh, did you lose me? Okay. All right.
For a second, you're back.
Okay. All right. But I guess you're wondering whether you should proactively send a message to people about membership status and what to do about payment and those kinds of things, right?
Yes, yes. And I don't think I'm in a situation where I've got members who, where it's a financial strain. Except for maybe my member that has the largest office, because he just had to lay off a bunch of people. And I just said, I actually put together a fairly decent email, and I'm happy to share it with you guys. I think that anybody who cuts back is doing so because they see a place to save money. Ooh, good. Are you there?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard from two different members. I heard from the guy in the big office, and he and his wife were wheeling and dealing, trying to get that price down, comparing me to a 50 square foot interior office at the big industrious downtown. And I was like, dude, this is a 200 square foot with a window, and I'm a one-man shop, so GTFO.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wasn't super surprised to hear from them. And then same thing, the other couple that emailed me, they were similarly just like wheeling and dealing when they were signing up for their membership. So, it's a mindset for sure.
Yeah.
So, but I do think it's nice to at least offer like maybe a credit. And I know somebody had wording about how not everyone can take the credit at the same time.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to offer you a credit.
Right.
If you're not going to come in. So then at that point, we've got people that are like maybe coming in like once or twice because they've got to get away from their kids. So, that's going to have to be like a yes, no, like, yes, are you going to come in or at all? Or no, are you never going to come in?
Yeah. 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 So you've got people who are still using the space, which is something. So
Yeah.
that's a factor in this as well. Yeah, maybe do you want to send us the draft email?
Yeah, I can. You want me just to drop the text in the chat?
If you can, yeah. I don't know. Zoom chat's kind of finicky with pasted text. It's like, I think it has a pretty low character limit.
Okay, let's see what we can do. Nope, doesn't like that. I will put it into a Google Doc.
Cool. While you're doing that, I'm going to see, there's a thread I saw someone post a little while back with a live analysis of the of that new bill. and I'm going to see if I can find any updates on it. How are y'all maintaining your focus during this time? Has it been a challenge? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's been a challenge. I'm sure for you with kids at home. But
For me, I don't have kids at home. I mean, I have, whatever, 20 somethings at home who are helpful and, make meals. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I find that, I've got Thrive, and then a lot of you probably have a job on the side too. So I've got a private practice, and my whole private practice has just changed a ton because now we're all fully online, and I got to figure out how to bill people. Normally I have a little credit card machine. I got so much stuff to figure out online, and then I'm going to transition my whole practice now to electronic medical records, which I've been considering doing, and now it makes complete sense. So I really have to do it right now in order to facilitate all this telemental health that I'm doing. So I focus on my members, and then focus on creating more online content and trying to keep up with, Tony, what you say and what Alex says and all that stuff, and what Kat, like I didn't hear Kat's conversation. I watched Alex's. Then I'm supposed to be training on, being ethical while I'm doing all this telemental health. And I am just slammed and overwhelmed. And normally I'm just one of those really even people, just always even. And now I'm like, wah. And so I'm trying to calm the hell down.
yeah, I think, Penny, that speaks to the larger thread that's happening for, I think, other space owners, but then also the members. And maybe part of why we're not hearing as much from the members is there's just so many people just making adjustments. People who are changing the way that they do business. Somebody who's, like you're a therapist, you've been doing in-person therapy face to
Doing completely
face.
changing the way I do business.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden everything's asunder. So, it's going to be a few weeks for everybody to get the hang of this. And trying to remember that as well, that like I still think that a lot of us are trying to apply the rules that we normally apply when like things are normal to the current day and age. And like we don't maybe need to move that quickly because maybe we can't move that quickly because stuff is way too crazy right now. And like, people aren't even necessarily ready to have this conversation yet. So
all of this is why I question the value of the virtual co-working sessions that I've been doing, because we don't get that many people coming. And I think that it's just, we kind of talked about this last week. There's just such a plethora of things happening online right now that maybe that's not helpful.
yeah. Well, and like, it's funny because, I kind of zig when people zag. I've been doing virtual remote co-working for years and years and years. Now everybody's doing it, but I'm also finding that people are burned out like crazy on video meetings. So in my mind, I wonder, well, how can we change that up and do something different? And two things that come to mind. Number one of the experiments I want to do on the social front is what would it look like to have a non-video meeting? Like just on the phone.
Yeah, wait a minute. You wrote an article about this. I read that.
Yeah. But like, we like, who says we have to all be on video? Let's get on a conference call and then we can deal with the kids and making sandwiches and stuff. And we don't have to worry about like physically being oriented and framed and lit properly for a screen. Like this is a draining experience if you have to do this for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. And so
it does help with focus though. It's a lot easier to check out during an audio call for me.
It's true. But depending on what you're trying to do, this also requires your focus. So it's hard to do other things while you're doing this. So I get it's kind of like two edges of the coin. It depends on what your two sides of the coin. it's a matter of like the context. But I think in like for at least for social things, I'm going to try playing with like a screenless meeting and make part of the expectation like, hey, only come to the meeting if you're planning on not like screwing around on Twitter the whole time. Because if you are, then don't bother, you know. Um, uh, but then the other thing is maybe we have to be more surgical about what we're trying to do so that it's not like us being on the video for hours at a time, because maybe it's just not practical. Maybe it's a quick check-in. So maybe it's, you know, a 15-minute meeting, or even if you get a bunch of people in the room, you could break them into breakout rooms.
Yeah.
And then it's a short stand-up where everybody talks about what they're up to and what they need help with, whatever. And then you do another check-in at the end of the day or later that week. So then people can kind of have the flexibility to deal with their situation, but they also, you know, still get help, basically. So I would say I would be very interested to try like shorter meetings that, you know, are just more like, let's just focus on like, how are you doing today? What are you needing? And I would say the third bit of that is that we have to acknowledge that it's not necessarily all about work right now. That, you know, and this, I remember this was, you know, this is important from other contexts I've been in too, where like, and actually I've seen this with Codivation. We've done this with Codivation before, where just being able to sit and say, look, like when we do a status update, right? Like we'll set a goal for 5 weeks. And then week 2, somebody comes in and we're like, hey, you know, how are you doing with your goals? And we're like, actually, I didn't make any progress. It's like, why? It was like, well, I feel really bad saying this, but I didn't get anything done. My grandma got sick. I might have to go down to North Carolina. I don't know what's going on with the hospital. And like, my kid is also like got a cold. And so like, I just really haven't been able to concentrate. And so I feel really bad. And like, to be able to say that out loud and be like, okay, well, it doesn't sound like you should have been working on your goals because you really have your family health issues to deal with. So like maybe it's really, really, really okay that you didn't get anything done because you got priorities right now, and right now taking care of your family is paramount. And like sometimes we need to give people that permission to recognize like, hey, we aren't machines here. We're humans. Shit's complicated, and it's okay. You know, so I would think that right now, probably more than anything, we can be providing value in helping people to be okay with not being productive. And so that I would probably want to try to emphasize too, is like creating experiences where we acknowledge people may not have a lot of time to talk, and that it's not necessarily productivity focused, but it's reality focused about like what's going on in your world. And, you know, is today a day where you're going to be able to work, or is today a day where you're going to have to focus on other things? And maybe that's where we're going to find some better, you know, like common ground for people to play with. Even if you like assume like, hey, what's screwing you up this week? Like what's going to take your attention away from work this week? And like, how can we make room to really acknowledge that and just own it? And I think that will provide some good emotional relief for the members. How does that sound, Jen?
See, this is why I pay you $99 a month. No, those are all really, really good points.
You know, and I'll just say further, this is probably a really great time for us to remember that co-working spaces are communities of humans that are here to support each other. And sure, we have the word work in the name, but like at the end of the day, we're a bunch of people who are here to support each other. And like, it's not always in work capacities that we're here to support each other. You know, like imagine one of your members gets, God forbid, gets sick right now, and they're alone in their house and they need help getting like fed or whatever. Like your community's perfectly situated to create like a food, what do they call it? Right, where they like people drop off meals on a schedule and everything, right? A meal train. And like, yeah, like you could see your members totally setting up something where like they make a spreadsheet and everybody drops a meal on the porch of the person who's sick during this time. Like, this is our time to be here for each other. And really, like, work is so screwed right now in so many ways that, like, it's probably healthy for us to, focus more on non-work stuff. And you think about all the different ways that this manifests. So the same way that I would start a Cotivation group under normal circumstances around typical work stuff, which is like getting more customers, staying focused, dealing with like invoicing and operational logistics, and like there's like 5 or 6 things that everybody always has issues with, right? Now I could say, like, if I started a Cotivation group today, it would be like, how do I deal with getting my company to work remotely? How do I deal with billing and communications and logistics? How do I handle my family situation? How do I handle sharing a workspace as my home with other people who are also working from home? And like, there's like 4 or 5 or 6 things now that everybody's dealing with and nobody has the answers to. I mean, shit, we should be doing co-working sessions where we just all get on screen share and just try to read about this freaking $2 trillion CARES Act and get a clue about what it is. All share one Google Doc and figure out if we can all get a bunch of money out of it so we can stop worrying so much, That's a pretty darn good idea. We should do that anyway. I feel like I want to do that now. I'm writing it down. But you know what I mean? Like, we're skating to where the puck is going here a little bit, right? But the other thing, Jen, and coming back to that larger point about like poking the bear, is finding responsible ways to check in with the members, to just take a temperature check and see how they're going. Because again, like, work sprints are good, but if most of your members are losing their minds because they're dealing with kids and whatever, and they're just not even thinking about work right now, then that's fine too. Let's find a way for the community to support them with that. And so what you might do, Jen, as a half measure is not the right word, but like just as like an interim activity, is this might not be a bad time to just, make a list of all your members again in a spreadsheet somewhere, make a new column, sort it by just people you feel like you could message personally, and just like dash off a few personal emails to like, your top 10 or 20 favorite members. Just be like, hey, how are you doing? Like, it could literally just be like, how are you doing? I just thought I'd check in. And like, keep it maybe off, off, like maybe Jen takes off her boss hat and puts on a human hat, and just be like, hey, like, how are you? And just like see how they are as people, and have just a conversation, and like leave the business stuff out of it for a moment just to get a temperature check.
We've actually done that with a couple of our members, where we were, like, I was trying to get a quote in a newspaper article, and I reached out to one of them and asked if they would want to give a quote for a press release I was writing, and a few other things that weren't necessarily like day house business related. And then I would always say, how are you doing? And like every single one of them, they all have small kids. They're all this is crazy. It's not sustainable. I'm going insane.
Yeah.
So then, like, for me to add an hour of virtual co-working on top of that is just silly. That's why none of them are coming. That's why it's all non-members.
Sure, which is understandable. So, I mean, it might even be at this point that it's just, that the value that you're able to provide is to facilitate some conversation just over brief messages, emails, text messages, whatever. Now, if you can get the members to do that for each other in some way, that would be even better. If there's some way that the members can just check in with each other. I know one thing that I've seen in some practices, they call it bookending, where, and you could do this over a text message where, 9 a.m. I sent, or 8 a.m. or whatever, we send each other a message with like what we're hoping to achieve today, or just our status update. And then at 6 p.m. we text again to just see like how we did. And I think actually, again, at this point, the bookending's usually to like get you to do stuff that you would normally just like avoid or you wouldn't focus on. But with this, I'd almost say like it's the other way, to say like, let's be more realistic about our expectations for today. So like could you set up a
Mhm.
bookending system between your members to say like, hey, if you're interested in bookending, put your name in the spreadsheet, everyone will get paired off. And then you can just message each other, just ask like, hey, what do you expect out of today? Is today going to be crazy or not? And then, maybe there's some way of giving people a sense of like permission, that they can like extremely minimal correspondence, extremely minimal time ask. We're talking about 2 text messages, but there's some
Mhm.
sense of emotional support. And there's some sense of like, if there's something that you do need help with, there's an opportunity for you to ask. And right now we're also in a place where we're all holding space. And I know for me, like I've been holding space, and like, it really only kind of broke open for me this morning a little bit emotionally, but like people are trying to hold it together. And at some point they're going to realize they have a need they've been ignoring because they're in crisis mode. And like being able to correspond with people and recognize like, hey, actually I do need help. Like actually today I'm not okay. And having that lifeline I think is just really important. So I don't know. We could talk more about that, but I think that could be a good direction. We just want to like listen to where the needs are at and then find ways to work with it. And even if the need
Mhm.
is like, hey, leave people alone for a little bit, then that's cool too. But we want to create that lifeline and make it available, make people know that it's available, so that when they need help, and they will need help, the community is there for them.
Mhm. Yeah,
How do you
good stuff.
how do your members talk to each other now, Jen? Is it a Facebook group or what?
Yeah, mostly it's the Facebook group. They're not too interested in Slack. I brought it up a couple times, and
Yeah.
it's, so, and not everyone's on the Facebook group.
Right. So those people don't really have a way of talking to each other unless they're in the space. And then basically you can reach everyone over email.
Yeah.
Got it.
So for me, my members are all in the Facebook group, 23 members, and a lot of them are active. But I have been wondering, someone last week suggested Mighty Networks
Yep.
instead of Slack. And so I did look at it, I mean, briefly, I don't know, for like 7 minutes or something yesterday. But I am wondering about having networks within my network so that people can talk about focused things, right? Like if I do this kind of therapy, or if I do therapy with kids and this is what is being helpful to me. And as Mighty Networks, are there other, like, I know I'm kind of changing the topic right now, but are there other platforms that would be helpful? Because I think Slack, my members aren't going to like Slack. A lot of people don't like Slack anyway. And then
I don't
it's
like
a little
Slack.
bit complicated to use compared to, Mighty Networks. Actually, it looks like it's all just pictures and you just poke on the picture that says I practice with kids. And then there can be a conversation in there.
Yeah.
I'm interested in having sub conversations that are pretty intuitive.
Yeah. So Mighty Networks is awesome and it gives you a lot of tools. You can do so much cool stuff with it. And I started following them like when they first launched, and I don't know how many years ago, 5, 8 years ago, whatever it was. And they've come a long, long, long way. So I think they're really situated well, and it's not too expensive. Um, the main thing in my mind is the communication design, the engagement design, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Slack. Basically, these are spaces, and you kind of have to think of them as physical spaces with people like milling around in them. And I think the trap that I've fallen into many times is like, I'm going to be able to create this space for someone. They're going to file in and they're all just going to start talking to each other and it's going to be great. And it's just not how it works, right? We have to prime the pump. We have to create some sense of place and activity in these spaces. And once you do a good job of that, I think the software platform doesn't matter as much. I think there are definite massive trade-offs between the different platforms, but to some degree, it's also your own inclination. So like if you're interested in mining networks, like go start one or join an existing one and like play with the tools and get comfortable with the interface. And, you know, it's one of the areas where it kind of, makes sense to invest some hours to get familiar with the tools because you're going to make a fairly big decision about where your community is going to live online. And once you make that decision, it's pretty hard to turn back. So, between Facebook, Slack, Mighty, and then like, I would say like, uh, what's it like spit and glue, put the pieces together like we do with this community. Um, you look at the different trade-offs of those different tools. Um, Mighty Networks gives you a lot of control and a lot of abilities. You can create subgroups. People can create their own subgroups. So there's like certain interests, but it's not chat oriented like Slack. It's more like a news feed like Facebook. Um, and you can have shared
You're
resources.
saying it's not chat. You're saying it's not chat oriented.
Correct. It's more like having your own private Facebook group that you can customize and control, but you can have channels for topics like Slack does. So it's a little bit of a middle ground between them, and you just have a lot more control over it because it's a customized platform. Um, and what else? If you pay extra for the upgrades, you also have like you can host online courses. You can charge for online courses. You can have there's topics, but then there's groups, so people can create subgroups, and they can have local meetups, for a larger community, not really applicable to you. But for example, you could have like a group of people within your community that all interact in a certain rhythm, like they all meet Friday mornings to talk about their goals or whatever. And then that group can have its own conversations and everything, and other people can join that or not. Um, but it really comes back to just your own conversation design. If you're going to create an online space, then you have to give people a reason to use that online space and an expectation of when and how. And so I've talked about this before with Slack, where, and actually I'll make a space analogy here. So you remember how we were talking with Katrina, where she had her big space and not a lot of people in it. And so part of what I was recommending to her was make 2 hours a week the 2 hours when you tell everybody to come in, because the space will look empty. And if there's only one person at a time coming in, it's always going to feel like one lonely person, two people. Oh, I come in, there's one person working in the corner. This place is dead. I'm out of here. But if you tell everybody, come in Tuesday at 10 o'clock, it's the best. I'm going to have mimosas. We're going to have the best blueberry cupcakes in town, whatever it is, blueberry muffins. And we're going to get work done and blah, 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 blah. People come in at 10 a.m. and everybody Katrina knows is there. So like she's putting everything into making those 2 hours super awesome, and people like, wow, this place is bumping. It's like things are going on. I meet great people. I'm having a good time. Because in the expanse of, a 50-seat co-working space for 40 hours a week, you just can't fill it. But I can fill it for 2 hours, right? So I make those 2 hours amazing. Now people are going to come in on Tuesdays because they know, oh, it's awesome on Tuesdays. And then it's going to start trickling into other days. You can expand from there, right? You establish a beachhead, right? You got one footing where you're like, this is awesome. This is when I tell the local newspaper to come take a picture, right? The same thing happens to an online community. So you activate that space where, your Mighty Network might be dead most of the hours of the week, but Monday morning you do a check-in and everybody knows, oh, first thing Monday morning, Penny's got a message in there, and let's check in and see how things are going for the week or whatever, right? And it's easy enough to say like, hey, Monday morning, what's one thing you're looking forward to this week? Great, and then everybody's learning about what everybody else is up to. Friday, what did you achieve this week? Easy stuff. But just then people don't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to the Mighty Network because I want to go hang out there and do stuff. I'm too busy for that. But I'll go on Monday morning when Penny posts her thing and I get the notification, and then maybe I will hang out afterward and poke around and see what else is going on. So
and so you're saying that it's can be useful for people to be in there at the same time. Like that wasn't really on my mind that people would have to be in there on the same time. On my mind was more just that there can be these subgroups so that people can have, an asynchronous conversation it hadn't even occurred to me to have like a synchronous conversation.
Well, yeah, for Mighty Networks, it's less important. For Slack, it's critical. But for Mighty Networks, the synchronicity isn't as important. But I still think you need to deliberately design rhythms for communication. So, like, if there's going to be a subgroup,
Okay.
there should be some expectation that that subgroup, that's the leader of that group posts an update once a week on what's going on. So there's some sense that, like, maybe some conversations can be just kind of like in the moment. So like in Slack, there might be like a kitchen channel, and it's literally just like anytime you leave extra food in the kitchen, you could just drop it into the kitchen channel, and then like you don't need to program that. It's just like people use it when they need it. It's there, or like a random channel, or funny links on the internet channel or something like that. Like you don't have to program that. I'm thinking more in terms of the primary channels that your members are going to expect to get value from. That anything like that, you want to just have some kind of rhythm for how the communication takes place.
Okay.
But the side channels you don't need to worry about. And yeah, like using it as a resource is fine. It's more just when you want to do something beyond it being like a passive resource that you want to be more deliberate about it.
Right.
So like, for example, in this group, we have a Slack channel, but we don't use it. And I could be encouraging people to use it, but if I just say people like, hey, post to the Slack if you want to post an update, what ends up happening is 1 out of every 8 members posts in there introducing themselves. Nobody responds because nobody's using it. And then they're like, well, that sucked. And then they go away, right? And so
Right.
I deliberately don't tell people to use the Slack because I'm not pushing it. Now, if I say like, hey, we're going to do a special midweek check-in where we're going to use Slack for a specific reason that's different from the Q&A, then I would push the Slack, but I would only push it during that time. Otherwise, I'm creating more problems for myself if I'm like passively trying to get people to use Slack without me modeling it by using it myself. And
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen, I looked at your letter.
Yeah.
It looks good. I mean, it looks super clear, and like you're really letting people know what's going on for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very forthright, and I think that it shows a lot of strength and honesty that I think is important to demonstrate for your members, for sure. And man, I see what you mean, Jen, when I'm reading this draft. I'm like, oof, like, so great letter. Do I send it? And like, when do I send it?
Yeah. Yeah, that was just sent directly to one person. And then I sent a variation on that to the guy who said that he couldn't afford his office. Basically just I tagged on to the end. He's a video editor. So I was like, you've got huge video screens and, those probably won't work in the open space. Do you want to work? Do you want to stay in the office? Because if so, let's discuss maybe like rolling payments or something like that. And hasn't gotten back to me yet. So I'm sure I'm going to hear from somebody on April 2nd when they check their credit card bill.
Yeah.
So I've got to send something out. It probably won't be this detailed, but I've got to send.
Do you bill everybody on the 1st?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's part of why we're talking about this, is like, it's a big day coming up. Got it. Well then, what I'm thinking, Jen, is it might be possible, like my quick impression is, like, maybe you do send some version of this, maybe it's shorter and it's more focused on just like, hey, like I'm thinking more that like the last paragraph might be where you can make the most cuts, to just like, this is more about me telling you what's going on with me than me like bringing up the topic of you maybe changing your membership, because I don't want to necessarily plant that in your brain, like,
okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a relationship analogy here, but I don't think that there's any good way to put it. It's just like, you don't want to bring up scary words, It's like if you're in like a legal situation or like if you're in like an adversarial business situation, like you don't bring up like lawsuits and lawyers, you know,
Yeah.
because it's just like once people see those words, they're like, ooh, Um, so, I'm thinking that this is more about like if you soften the language in that last paragraph, then that's easier. Like, hey, I know this is a crazy situation for you too. So if there's anything you want to talk about, let me know. So you're not like specific. People know in between the lines that you're talking about like membership issues, but like you're not explicitly like planting that in people's minds.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm thinking is that maybe you can offer in closing like a plan for when you intend to update people on the status. So like, hey, it's a changing situation. We're learning, everything week by week. We're hoping to learn a lot more about what kind of assistance we can get. So, you know, um, so we'll plan to get back to you again in a week with an update on how things are going. Um, and any kind of like, improvements or breaks to the situation. So
Yeah.
I think it'll help people if they read it if they know, oh, I don't have to do anything right now because Jen's going to email me again in a week. So maybe I just hold my breath for a while and know that we're going to get an update later and that'll help.
Mm-hmm.
But Tony, you're also saying that we shouldn't really talk about staying afloat or closing for good. Like we shouldn't really be putting that on the table. We should just be, Jen should be talking value for members, but not really put that on the table.
Well, I think so. I think like the middle part of the letter where she talks about like, this is the situation. If this happens, then we're going to be in trouble. I think that that's healthy without creating this sense of danger of like, we might go out of business. Like we don't really talk about that. But if you say like, hey, if everybody quits, we will go out of business. Like, like we're not going to say that right now necessarily, but like there is that implied thing.
And the only reason why I had that in there was because this person said, on April 1st, I would like you to change my membership to such and such. And I was like, no, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that like, this is like, woo, okay, scary. Let's see more. Revenue was slashed in half. Wow. I didn't even realize that half your money came from that. These expenses continue, more of the same, made expense cuts. I'm not taking a salary. Wow, Jen. If we maintain current level shakes, we'll still be able to tread water for a few months. Okay, so they're not about to go out of business, but it's scary,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's not scary today. I don't have to worry about like, there have been other spaces that I know that they just close. And like you're a small business, like nobody would be surprised if small businesses just freaking kaput, right? And then I got to worry about like running into the space to go get my computer monitor or something. So even being able to say like, hey, we can endure this for a few months is actually kind of encouraging to me as somebody who's worried about a small business right now. So, and you're also saying like, look, I've got a few months to figure this out, and by then the world will have changed many more times over. So like, please hang with us because, everybody who leaves makes it harder. But you're basically saying it's a dire situation. It's really hard and we're doing our best. And here's what we're doing. And I'm confident that we're going to make it. And like, that's good. That's where you want to be, right? Like show people it's serious and scary and then make them feel better that you're a leader.
Or make them feel bad for leaving.
Well, also that. Well, and people, it helps for people to know what's going on because people, when they don't know, they fill in with assumptions. And this is part of what I'm sure Penny will say has been in some of her readings is like, when you don't talk, people fill in with assumptions. And a lot of times the assumptions are wrong. I'm sure there are people who think that you have a big ass trust fund and you're doing just fine and you've got plenty of cash and blah, blah, blah. And like, so people need to know like, hey, this is the reality, and that's part of why proactive communication is helpful. And also actually to say it like, if I'm not hearing from my co-working space owner at all right now, I'm worried that the next email is going to be that the space went out of business. so it helps to have that correspondence to say like, hey, it sucks. As you expect, this is not an easy time, but we're not in imminent danger of going out of business. Provided everything stays where it is. So, yeah, I think it's good. I would add something, I would trim that last paragraph and I would add something about when you're going to update them again. And maybe also emphasize, hey, toot your horn a little bit. We've also done so much to create value online. We're doing all of this awesome stuff. And I'm really excited about all the good that we've done up till this date. And, go to this page to check out what we're up to. And I would love to hear from you about, any other ideas you have about things we can do remotely to create value during this time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might drop a redraft of this into our Google group, and I would love to get any feedback.
Sounds great. Cool. Penny, anything more you want to bring up while we're here?
No, this has been a helpful call.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, I remembered that somebody I know did a deep dive of the CARES Act on Facebook. I just dropped her post into the chat.
Good.
And then looks like Jamie Russo just did a Facebook Live about it too.
All right, great. Let's see if we can find the replay then.
Yeah.
Well, I have read the 800+ page document, as have some of my best colleagues and friends.
Wow.
Ooh, she's been busy doing things that I haven't been doing.
Should we just read this? Should we just read this together now? I'll put it on a screen share. It's going to be worth it for other people tuning in too. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the nice thing about this is that it's totally guaranteed. There's no credit requirement or whatever, which is great.
Yeah, $200,000 loans can be approved without a personal guarantee.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It's a pretty awesome too that it includes self-employed, sole prop. I'm very curious about that. As a sole prop, we're like, I don't pay me a salary, so like, how does that work? Like, how does payroll work for me in this? I'm going to be very curious about that. And the members are going to be really curious about this too. This is where the co-working space is going to be able to provide a lot of value. Just defer fees, interest, no less than 6 months, no more than a year. You don't have to make any payments for at least 6 months.
Yeah, so that payroll thing, it's like, well, if that's true, depending on how quickly the money comes in, then I probably don't need to lay off anybody or reduce their hours.
Or maybe you do need to lay them off, and yeah, how does that work? So you don't lay them off and then the government pays for you, or you do lay them off and then they help pay that?
I think.
Well, it says, yeah, will be used to retain workers, maintain payroll. Okay.
Yeah. But again, just looking at my cash flow, like I can only sustain a full-time employee for a few more weeks at my current level of revenue. So I've got 2 buttons. Which one do I press?
Yeah. Well, so this seems to be the big question mark for me is, all right, so let's say that, Jen, let's say, for example, you're able to secure a loan through this program to pay your employee salary for the next several months. and you're only able to pay her because the loan gave you the money to give you the ability to pay her. 6 months from now, do you then have to come up with that money to pay her the salary for this time that you otherwise wouldn't have been paying her? Or 6 months from now, does the government forgive that loan because you were able to keep her as an employee?
Right.
The borrower shall have a portion of their loan forgiven in the amount equal to their payroll costs, not including costs for compensation above $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Interest payments on mortgages, rent payments, and utility payments between February 15th and June 30th, 2020. Loan forgiveness will be reduced if the borrower reduces employment by ratio similar to their reduction in employment, or if borrower reduces salaries, wages more than 25%. So it sounds like if you keep your person employed and use the loan money to pay them, you get to keep the money.
Well, yeah, read right below, like three paragraphs below or 4. Borrowers can receive $10,000 cash advances that are forgiven if spent on paid leave, payroll, mortgage and lease payments. It cannot be met due to revenue losses, right? And so, like, I don't have an employee. I pay my daughter, and I'm still paying her because she does specific social media work for me. And that's not really at risk right now. But if I couldn't pay my lease, then I guess I would be eligible for potentially some amount of money if I couldn't pay my lease.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Which I can't pay my lease right now.
Well, and if I'm just breaking down this language, equal to their payroll costs, comma, interest payments on mortgages, comma, rent payments. So the borrower shall have a portion of their loan forgiven in an amount equal to rent payments and utility payments. So I'm hearing you take out a loan to cover your rent, and then it gets forgiven.
I don't know, but down below it says, or repaying obligations that cannot be met due to revenue losses. So I have not had any revenue losses.
I'm thinking that's
so if I take
cash advances. So this
cash
is
advances are different than loans.
This seems like less of a loan and more of a grant.
Well, the idea, Jen, is that it becomes a grant, but it's the reason that it's not a grant is because it's contingent on you staying in business and employing your person. So if they just gave you a grant, you could take the money and fire your employees and walk away. Whereas what they're saying is this is a loan and you have to pay it back unless you stay in business and keep your employee, at which point you get to keep it. So it's
amazing. It blows my mind that the U.S. government is doing this.
Clever. It's clever. You got to give them some credit. I'm sure there are a lot of issues with this and there will be a lot of criticism, but they moved quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're also building off of precedent from other events. Like they're probably using some of this from the 2008 crash as well, that bailout as a template.
And there's no information yet about how to apply. Like that's coming, I guess. And is this the same as the SBA loan? The disaster loan?
Man, I don't know.
I mean, the SBA is definitely involved. Well, like I said, I'm going to be on a call this afternoon about this. So I will, I'll circle back with you guys and let you know what I learned.
Okay. What is
Thanks, you guys. I'm going to get off also.
All right. Thanks, guys. Great chatting. Stay healthy. I'll talk to you in a week.
You too. Happy birthday, Tony.
Thanks.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you. Take care.